Here, Simon, because I tell you what, there's been a very interesting sort of piece of technology, I would say, uncovered this weekend in the Blue-White Ascend deck. I know you're very high on it, and is this a strategy we're going to see explored more next week in Bilbao?
I absolutely expect so. I'm going to be honest, I'm a bit disappointed that Eduardo just found himself drafting a straight white-black deck. I actually expected him to go quite aggressively for white-blue Ascend once again.
This is something that I think that we're going to see a lot more of in the coming weeks, because I mean, blue-white, it fell off the face of the earth, and all of a sudden now it's skyrocketed back into people's attention. And I mean, yeah, this deck has won a fair bit here, and these players now seem to be in readiness now that Eduardo Sajgalik is happy with the 6 that he's found off the top of his library, and so we are ready to get underway here with the first quarterfinal here at GP London. Hello, my friends, and welcome to coverage of GP London, continuing live across the world. And thank you so much for choosing to join us this evening as we crown a champion before very much longer. Here in the quarterfinals, we are looking at Seth Manfield and Eduardo Sajgalik facing off a black-white mirror match. You're in the hands of Riley Knight, and alongside me it is Simon Gertzen. We're in the booth here. We've had a long weekend calling Rivals of Ixalan Limited, sealed yesterday, drafting today, and it's all come down to these final 8 competitors making up the top 8 of our tournament. Legion Lieutenant, a great start for Seth Manfield. He's off to the races early, Simon.
Yep, it's almost a bit unfortunate to expose your Lord that early, because now a removal spell means it's not going to have an immediate impact later on in the game, but of course you have to play your 2-drops when you draw them.
Well, Manfield is not going to be able to take too much of an advantage out of this Legion Lieutenant, as Eduardo Sajgalik is ambushing it. It is taken care of very, very quickly with that Reaver Ambush. One of the premium removal spells that was entered into the format with Rivals of Ixalan, and I know I'm not alone in thinking that removal's gotten a real upgrade recently, Simon.
Yep, absolutely. This is significant change to the how Ixalan draft format played out, where cheap interactive removal spells were at an absolute premium.
Here's a nice draw for Eduardo Sajgalik. It is, of course, Ravenous Chupacabra. Ravi Chups is in the hands of our 7th ranked player, who you will have noticed, Simon, actually went first. Now, the play draw rule is, of course, the higher seeded player, the higher ranked player, which is, of course, Manfield in this case, finishing first in the Swiss, gets to choose whether to go first or second. And interestingly enough, he chose to draw.
Probably after knowing the deck lists, I would assume. So maybe because he knows it's a mirror match, or maybe just because he thinks his deck is well suited for the late game, preferring to draw here. Interesting situation here. 2/2 flyer attacking into a 2/3.
And Manfield is indeed going to blow up the spot of this Exultant Sky Marcher. We saw there a Divine Verdict, and Sajgalik knew what was up. I mean, you don't attack a 2/2 into a 2/3 unless you've got something here. Probably
still a relatively good trade. Your opponent spends the turn on a clunky removal spell that costs more than the creature you played. It's not great, but I think there are worse ways to get blown out by Divine Verdict.
Sanguine Glorifier is the play now. Just a lonely hill giant here for Eduardo Sajgalik as a 4-mana 3/3. Manfield following things up with a Legion Conquistador. He's found 1, he's found 2, he's found 3. Lucky boy. There we go. Filling out the hand nice and easy. The old Squadron Hawk.
Yep. Was good to draft them. I believe it was M10 limited. They were very good in constructed, if you remember. And Legion Conquistador is now getting his chance in Rivals of Ixalan Limited, I would say.
One of the cards that, I mean, potentially would be paired very well with something like a Ketra's Monument in constructed. And given the fact that Standard has been sort of shaken up quite significantly with recent bannings, it may be something that's worth exploring. But right now, we're just looking at its role in Limited, and alongside Famished Paladin, Seth Manfield's developing quite a board of pretty respectable vampires here.
No, that would have been a really nice 2-drop as well, combining it with the trigger from the Bloodletter to let it untap. But maybe Seth has a few more ways to gain life in his deck. Otherwise, it's just going to be a defender for most of the game.
Well, here is one of the most ridiculous cards in Ixalan, Ravenous Chupacabra. Ravi C is going to take care of that Sky March Bloodletter. No more blood to be let out. And leaving behind a 2/2 body as well, which tussles nicely with many of the cards that Manfield may look to deploy. Suncrested Pterodon the next play for the world #1 here. And Sajgalik now, after having played what really is one of the most premium uncommons. It's described as by many as a mythic uncommon, such as its power level, Simon.
Yeah, it is one of these typical examples of an uncommon that's stretching the power level, of course. If you have Impale as one of the really good removal spells, unconditional removal spells of the format, and then you print a creature that has Impale as part of its enters the battlefield trigger, you know you have a powerful card.
Well, of course, you can't destroy your own creatures with a Ravenous Chupacabra, which is an enormous downside.
Not quite as good as Impale.
Not quite as good as Impale, but it does a very good job nonetheless of really containing an opponent's game plan. And I mean, you know, there's been a lot of ink spilled, a lot of words said about the Ravenous Chupacabra. We don't need to go over it too much here, but suffice to say, very, very powerful option indeed, and something that has already made a name for itself in constructed formats as well. Clean 4, a clean 4 of here in Legion Conquistador on the battlefield.
You know what's good against 2/2s?
3/3s?
Golden Demise.
Also a Golden Demise here, and Eduardo Sajgalik does indeed have the City's Blessing after having played a 7th land, and Manfield is about to be blown out by it, or is he? No, with the City's Blessing coming down on both sides of the battlefield here. That is not the use that Seth Manfield would have wanted with the Pride of Conquerors, but he's more than happy to snap it off.
I mean, he has to, otherwise he loses 2/3 of his board. But Eduardo, well, he can't be super happy, but on the other hand, Pride of Conquerors would have blown him out as well. So I think it was ultimately a fair exchange.
Pride of Conquerors, one of the other incentives to go heavy on the Legion Conquistadors, and just generally any kind of go-wide strategy that Vampires is so good at. And as this match continues, my friends, we do have our first game result from one of the back tables. Mark Jacobson has gone up against Marcelino Freeman in game #1. So an early lead here for Jacobson, who finished 5th in the Swiss. Another one of these Americans who made the trip over the Atlantic. Presumably he'll be appearing at the Pro Tour next week as well, and he's done very well for himself so far. Down comes the Dire Fleet border. That's going to ding Sajgalik down to 9.
The first pirate to enter the battlefield. Quite impressive.
Yeah, this draft certainly supported these two players reasonably well in putting together very similar looking decks here.
But Seth's deck, at least in this game, looks a lot more focused, a lot stronger. And these Legion Conquistadors certainly played their role as well.
Deathless Ancient. Nice recursive threat. He's certainly got plenty of Vampires to tap to bring it back. So Manfield sails across in the air once again, this time for 6. And Sajgalik is down to 1. Queen's Agents. And a Bishop of the Bloodstained is enough for Sajgalik to start to pack him up there. Not too much to be said about it. A Ravenous Chupacabra was probably the strongest play of his game, but Manfield just completely able to outvalue him at essentially every turn there, Simon.
Yeah, that wasn't close at all. You can look at the live totals if you want to get an idea of how close this game was.
Yeah, there was a pretty wide margin between them there. But just going back to that original point we made before, Simon, about the fact that this table seemed to support a reasonably robust 2 black-white decks.
They were on opposing sides of the table, so...
Diametrically
yes,
I see.
That makes actually a lot of sense to me, because black-white Vampires has been one of the stronger tribes in Ixalan. I think it got some minor upgrades as well. We talked about the cheap removal spells in particular, Moment of Craving and Reaver Ambush, and now, well, you just have one of the strongest tribes in the format. Two people drafting this deck is probably the right number.
Another result from our back tables here on Table B. Alexander Kreutz has actually got up in game number 1 against Brad Nelson. Brad Nelson was an unstoppable force for much of the Swiss rounds. I think he went undefeated until around round 13, I think it was. He was 12-0.
Yep.
Undefeated for a very long time, but he's going to have to dig in deep if he wants to make it through to those semis and then onwards towards the trophy. And Alexander Kreutz is going to chuck everything he can to prevent that from happening.
Kreutz has been crushing some big names. He had to beat Lukas Blohan to actually sneak into the top 8. Now he's taking on Brad Nelson. Talked to him very briefly, Alexander, and he said, I tried to stay as open as possible, and I think I got rewarded for it. He has 2 Merfolk missed binders in his sideboard because he moved out of Merfolk.
Oh, no. Oh, Simon. Oh, dear. Bit of a turn up at the books there for Alexander Kreutz, who again snuck in on tiebreakers into 8th place. The German's done very well. Heading over from his native Deutschland to come and get it done in London. No local phases in the top 8, as we mentioned. Quite a few fly-ins, really. Looks like the 2 Alexanders are the only local people. When I say local, I mean, of course, European. And Sajgalik and Manfield do have access to opposing pools. Now, you'll notice the word pool is written on the top of that deck list registration sheet. It's my understanding they don't have the decks registered on those sheets.
Exactly. That's why it says pool on the sheet.
I did put those together rather cleverly, didn't I, Simon?
No, I think this rule is actually great. We always had this problem between giving the players 0 information, rewarding them for scouting or watching the stream or any kind of replays, or giving them full information. But I think it's a bit too much if you know the exact 40 cards that your opponent is bringing to the table. So this kind of compromise of giving exactly the contents of the pool actually even rewards experience with the format and allows players to trick their opponents a little bit by for example, sideboarding or including some cards that they just didn't expect.
Yeah, and this is the thing. I mean, in many cases, you can look at this deck list or this deck registration and from that kind of guess what the deck is going to look like, especially when it comes to removal and combat tricks and what have you. But, there's still a bit of counterplay. There's still many ways in which a player can, outmaneuver an opponent even on that axis there. We've got another result from our back table, Simon, while this shuffling and mulliganing is going on. I know it's part of the game, and unfortunately not something we can necessarily avoid every time. But Marcelino Freeman and Mark Jacobson have equalised 1-1 here, Simon, at the end of game number 2. So on table C, it's heading towards a pretty blistering fast finish here. Steve Rubin also getting up. You can see on the back tables there, it looks like they've already completed their game number 1. Alexander Hulton has gone down to Steve Rubin in game number 1. Oh, no, sorry. No, excuse me. That was game number 2 that's just finished, and you can see Rubin with a big smile on his face jumping out of his seat. Our first semi-finalist is Mr. Steve Rubin. Congratulations indeed to him. What a way to open your trip over across the Atlantic.
Steve has a pretty sweet dinosaur deck.
Is that right?
I want to see that on camera. Hopefully next round we will be able to feature some Polyraptors.
Oh, right. Has he got the Forerunner?
He got the Forerunner.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. He's on that PV tip. Yeah, there we go. We saw Paula Vida Damata Rosa rather famously making 500,000 Polyraptor tokens, of course, last week. You can get across all of that. I think it was clipped on Twitch, so make sure you see that. It was quite an incredible moment there. Marshall Sutcliffe jumping out of his skin when it happened, of course. And he's looks like Steve Rubin learned a lesson or two from the Brazilian superstar there, Simon.
Oh, he watched the stream.
Yep.
And came here and was crushing.
Yep. Yep. Would have read the literature, the tournament reports afterwards. I hear they were very well written. I don't know personally, but that was what I heard.
I thought he was just in Twitch chat for a while, and that was sufficient.
Yeah, that might have also been it. I don't know. In any case, Seth Manfield, Eduardo Sajgalik heading towards game number 2 here. Manfield known for his very thorough shuffling technique, so might be time to hop out to the kitchen, make yourself a cheese sandwich before Seth Manfield hands Sajgalik back over his deck. Yes, indeed. Ooh, looks like you might even be able to get some tomato on that bad boy before you have to come back and sit down to watch game number 2. Here we go. In any case, players going to draw their opening hands, and Seth Manfield will be looking to double down on a very impressive performance in game number 1 to push himself into the semi-finals, joining Steve Rubin if he does so. We'll see how things go. Sajgalik down to 6 in game number 1. Simon, what's it looking like now in game number 2?
I saw a moment of craving and a Weaver ambush. A lot of swarms, so Eduardo is definitely not coming out of the gates blazing, and it looks like Eduardo took a page out of Manfield's book here, putting him on the play after he lost game 1. So I like this, even if it's just for a bit of mind gaming here. If you're playing against Seth Manfield, #1 player in the world right now, and he puts you on the play, you probably should put him on the play.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say here. I mean, even in the dark, if I didn't know what was going on there, if Manfield put me on the play in game number 1 and then beat me, which I would imagine would be the expected outcome, you can bet your bottom dollar I'd be following in his footsteps, essentially. I'm not going to try to outmaneuver him.
No, and then just lose on the draw.
Well, that'd be it, wouldn't it? It'd be a very clean...
But you would feel smarter about it.
I feel very smart about it. I feel very, very smart about it, indeed. As we see Legion Conquistador fetch out a couple of friendos here. Fathom Fleet Border is going to come down, and once again, in the land of the 2-2s, the 3-3 is king. Simon, you've professed your love for the 3-3s in this format throughout the weekend, and right now we're seeing exactly why.
Yeah, and still, of course, Legion Conquistador is a powerful card, but do you really want to double block here? It's such a bad feeling, because the ability for Eduardo to generate cheap 2-for-1s, maybe even deploying another threat onto the battlefield is so huge.
Dusk Charger, another 3-3 here, so Sajgalik on that mono 3-3 life. He loves himself a Hell Giant here, it would seem. Manfield all about the Grey Ogres, however. But Dusk Charger is another card that's risen in many estimations this weekend. I mean, Ascend, I think it was pretty ferociously undervalued as a mechanic heading into Rivals drafts earlier on, but 10 permanents is a lot more achievable than you'd think.
It's somehow exactly the sweet spot. You would think maybe they just took it because we have the decimal system, or 10 fingers, or whatever.
Well, like, I mean, most people. I mean, I can count to 10. It's pretty. Most people can.
Somehow, okay, that might actually be the reason. It's no, but the 10 seems like a really good number, something that seems like an accomplishment, but it still happens almost every game. Manfield
offering the double trade ski here with Sajgalik. But it looks like a moment of craving is going to break up this particular party and keep the horse alive. But Simon, it's an interesting characterization you made there, calling it the sweet spot. And I think it's a good observation there to note that it happens enough of the time to make things interesting. And it doesn't happen every time. It's not a guarantee, as it would be with, say, 6 or 7 or something there like that. But if a player works towards it with cards like Sailor of Means, Paladin of the Bloodstain, what have you, it is, you can turbo your way towards it.
Yep. You can definitely accelerate it, but even in decks that are not built for Ascend, you can assume that these cards will at some stage get their bonuses, and that's actually great in Limited. You want, in particular, you want your cheap cards to give you a bonus effect as the game goes longer.
Now, this was a great turn for Sajgalik in the fact that he got to leverage a removal spell against one of Manfield's creatures and snag himself a clean trade there. He also got the 3-3s trading, but the Bloodstained Paladin was the one that came down as an enormous beater, a 4-4, and attempted out a removal spell here from Seth Manfield. This guy is not interested in that Paladin, Blood-Crazed Paladin, I should say, knocking him about.
It's true, but at the same time, Dusk Charger will soon be larger than that 4-4, I believe. 5, 6, 7, 8. So Eduardo is not counting himself. He knows how to count to 10.
Yeah,
we confirmed that.
We confirmed
in
that.
The Swiss.
He did indeed. He drafted an absolutely sick blue-white Ascend deck with things like Spirewinder. I think he had a few Secrets of the Golden City, and he showed us all how it's done. He looks to be running it back now with the Dusk Charger, which again is almost a 5-5. So Manfield, hard-pressed to come up with some answers here, Simon. Attacks with the 2-2. Look at that. Talk about that poker face on Manfield.
That's a sorcery, I believe.
Uh-oh. Oh, dear. Sajgalik is hoping to get some value out of that Cleansing Ray in Manfield's turn, but no, it doesn't work like that.
That's pretty awkward.
Yeah.
Because I would say that would have been much better in Eduardo's main phase, just to free his 4/4 and get in for damage. He wanted to get extra value by ambushing a creature.
But that's not, that's not going to do it here. Well, however, but I mean, the fact that the Cleansing Ray still has a lot of utility against Manfield's deck, as a Doomblade, a white Doomblade, but also knocking out the Pious Interdiction. I mean, isn't that just a better use of it?
Well, he did want to use it in that way.
Oh, sure. Okay, so he wasn't attempting to target the Conquistador. He
just thought it was an instant and he could also ambush the Conquistador in combat.
I see, okay. Yeah, it's a bit of a shame there that Sajgalik has to take an extra 2 points of damage, but he'll have learned his lesson. I'll tell you what, he won't make that mistake next weekend. Didn't quite go to plan here for Sajgalik. It means that Manfield is going to be able to commit further to the line. This one is definitely an instant. The Reaver Ambush snapped off at lightning speed here by Sajgalik. So good to see he was still able to use all his mana.
That's actually great, and it also doesn't matter that he gave away this information. It's now a pretty crushing board state for from Eduardo's side. He's counting once again if he can add 2 permanents to the battlefield. That could actually be better than to deal with the Pious Interdiction.
Going to be a recover here.
Okay, maybe if he draws a land.
Bring back a border, draw a card. No land. Okay, well, freeing up that 4/4 I think is still a totally respectable play.
And a land would have given him the City's Blessing. That's why he played the recover first.
Now, a few things to note here, because the Bloodstained Paladin, the Blood-Crazed Paladin didn't leave the battlefield, Simon. It didn't leave the battlefield, which means that it was just pacified. It had the Pious Interdiction on it, which means that not only does it come back, is it back in action with the 3 counters on it? It can attack. It doesn't have Summoning Sickness.
No, it was just waiting for its time. It was interdicted, but now it's back at work.
This is chilling out. It's taking it very, very easy. But as you say, time to go to work here for the Blood-Crazed Paladin and Manfield. Under a fair bit of pressure here.
You can't keep these blood crazes up constantly.
No, you got to rest. It's important to get your rest. And you can see him. Look at how he's sat. He's crouching down, man.
Job's done.
He's had a rough time. So after a bit of a breather, he's got back up and about here and taught Manfield a stiff lesson. And a golden demise now.
Eduardo was so close to getting the City's Blessing the whole game, and he just didn't get there because his draws didn't quite shape up.
It's never quite allowed him to do it. But hey, he doesn't need it. He doesn't need it. The Paladin and the Dust Charger getting in for a few points of damage, and Manfield has seen enough. We're going to game 2 here, ladies and gentlemen. Seth Manfield, Eduardo Sajgalik splitting the first 2 games. The world #1 going down after Sajgalik's pretty impressive performance in the second game here. Player's going to examine the card pools. Small smile on the face of Manfield as we head to game number 3. So an update from the other floors there, of course. The other matches there. In addition to the 1-1 result between Manfield and Sajgalik, we have already got our first semi-finalist in Steve Rubin. The current game score between Mark Jacobson and Marcelino Freeman is 1-1. And we're still waiting for further updates from Brad Nelson and Alexander Kreutz. Last we heard, Kreutz up 1 game against the Constructed Master. Although it looks like now we've just had it updated and Marcelino Freeman has taken out the game and the match against Mark Jacobson. So congratulations indeed to Marcelino Freeman, the second semi-finalist to be crowned here at GP London. He's made the trip over from Mexico, and I tell you what, I bet he's glad he has.
Oh, absolutely, yes. Especially if you are traveling to the Pro Tour anyway, flying through London most likely, playing the GP here is a smart choice.
We're very happy with that. Locked up another PT performance if he wasn't already secure with an invitation to Dominaria or the ones after that, in addition to those fat stacks of cash. I know, you got to holler for that dollar. This guy is on that paper chase and he's done very well indeed. And speaking of which, Alexander Kreutz and Brad Nelson, both of these guys battling hard for their semi-final appearance, and Nelson has equalized. So fans of the American will be very, very pleased to hear that. His limited chops are improving. He's worked very closely with people like Seth Manfield to become a better limited player, a better all-round player, because we know how good he is at Constructed. He's been good at Constructed for years.
In Standard in particular. I think Standard Constructed is what I would call him maybe the best player in the world.
Best player in the world, best Standard player in the world.
Best Standard player in the world.
I don't think that's an exaggeration.
If you combine everything, like preparation for a tournament, deck choice, and playing the deck to its outs.
Do you know what his real strength is as a Standard player though? Is tuning. Yep. You know, I hope this isn't an inappropriate thing to say, but I don't see him as an innovator. I don't see him as someone who comes up with fresh archetypes, is constantly, you know, reinventing these new deck types or new strategies. Like, for example, like someone like Sam Black or Josh Adelaide as a deck builder.
No, that's not his role. But at the same time, you can only tune a tier 1 deck to be the best deck for a weekend if you know exactly what's going on in the format and if you have the right read of the metagame.
And that's his strength.
And that's actually one of the hardest things to do in Magic.
And he is, I would say, the best at it. He and his brother Corey Baumeister showed us that with back-to-back GP top 8s last year. This guy is just an absolute powerhouse. I mean, and a deck like Teamer Energy was so perfect for him as well, due to the fact that it could be, you know, reconfigured. It could position itself in any way to beat more or less anything. And it's no surprise to hear that Nelson had such wonderful success with the deck. And I'm really keen to see how he goes in Modern next weekend. It's no secret that Modern is, of course, the best format in Magic. I mean, I'm sure there's no one who could possibly disagree with that assessment. And the pros coming into this wide-open Modern format with a huge range of available decks. So, I mean, it's exciting times for fans of Modern everywhere. It's
exciting, yes, but it's also a bit scary for these pros because they play Limited and Standard for work. They do this all the time.
Yeah.
They grind these formats on Magic Online, at GPs, at open events. But Modern, if they don't particularly like the format, like somebody like Sam Black who just enjoys playing Lantern, then this Modern Pro Tour can be scary. It's different. It's not Standard. There are a lot more decks. There are a lot more cards to know about. If you're a young player, Steve Rubin, maybe that's something that you're not as familiar with as compared to Standard.
Yeah, it's a format that rewards a very deep and robust knowledge of the format. I mean, you've got to know everything. There's these new kids on the blocks, especially decks like 5-color humans, Mono Blue Living End. This is the latest piece of technology. Mardu Pyromancer as well has been getting up and about. But then there are the old mainstays. How do you beat a Tron deck with the same list that you can still beat a deck like Jesco Tempo? Is Grixis Shadow still one of the best decks in the format? I mean, there are so many questions we're going to find the answers to in Bilbao next weekend.
And Seth Manfield actually was very successful with Blackweed Tron recently at a GP. That was in December in I think Oklahoma
City. Excuse me, yeah.
I think we've both been writing Modern articles.
We have. Yeah,
in preparation of the Pro Tour.
I've been all over Mardu Pyromancer, I tell you that much.
I have this secret deck. I'm not going to tell you about it, but there's a card. If your life total drops low, it gets larger and larger.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and then
sounds pretty technical.
You can even include Teamer Battle Rage for some surprise wins.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Bit of draft chaff.
I promise not to tell anyone about it.
We'll leave it there. But, and return our attention now to game number 3, which is, of course, the deciding game between Seth Manfield and Eduardo Sajgalik. Seth Manfield getting on the board with a 1/1 Dusk Legion Zealot. Throwback, of course, to Elvish Visionary, drawing a card, although it comes at the cost of 1 life. Don't like the look on this guy's face. Zealot, I think, is a well-chosen word for this fellow. He doesn't seem to be there to make friends. Someone who is here to make friends, however, is Legion Conquistador. 3 of them, in fact, for Seth Manfield. Oh, no. The world number 1 just searching out 2, maybe 1 already in hand for him, Simon?
Or he doesn't want to discard it. Sometimes your hand size is such that you don't want to get the Legion Conquistador until the second trigger.
And you can always go and search out the remaining ones with...
if you don't draw it.
Oh, yes. Yes. So, an Arterial Flow. This is a card I know that you do not like. Turning up your nose at it.
Would you say it's better or worse after the opponent has just gotten some free Conquistadors into his hand?
I'm going to guess worse.
I think so too.
Yes, correct.
It's also just not a board impacting spell. I've seen too many Arterial Flows on turn 3.
That's what I was going to say. I don't think this card is that bad.
No.
I think that it's not played at the point that it's best played on turn 6 when your opponent has 2 cards in hand.
But somehow the games don't play out this way.
No.
It's some formats are mind rot friendly, some others are not, and I need more convincing that this is something worthwhile that you should be spending your time on.
And the rider on it as well, losing 2 life and gaining 2 life. It's just not something that really pushes this card that much further over. Into the realm of real playability, Simon. It just doesn't do that much more, that sort of random life drain rider on it. In any case, Sajgalik has casted. Is Manfield still considering which cards he's going to discard here? As he examines, it looks like 1 card he's already consigned to the scrap heap.
Deep in the tank here.
Deep in the tank. Popped on the scuba equipment. He's gone right down the bottom. So he's going to discard a Legion Conquistador. And is that a Vampire Revenant there as well?
It is. So probably a landlight draw from Seth, who otherwise could just be ditching extra lands. Here, also because he got 1 Conquistador less, he didn't have 2 to discard.
Okay.
Otherwise, I think that's what we would have seen.
Just discard the 2 Grey Ogres here. But he's going to go and search out the 4th and final Legion Conquistador from his deck. Of course, didn't take the full 3 out there because he would have had to discard. So Manfield navigating those choppy waters pretty comfortably, I would say. That arterial flow, not too much of an issue for Manfield to come through. And Simon, look, I accept your criticism of the card. It is not leveraged particularly effectively, generally speaking.
It's and I'm not even saying that this shouldn't be in Eduardo's deck. It's just I don't think it should be a high pick, or you should be particularly happy about having it in your deck.
Dusk Charger.
Something I'm much more excited about is actually an uncommon with the same casting cost, and that's the Golden Demise. Now that's a card I can get behind.
And it's also a card that Sajgalik will be looking to leverage against Manfield's board. He's getting attacked for 5 right now, and it looks like these fearless Conquistadors are getting in along with the Zealot.
I don't think he should block here. I think he should only pretend to contemplate blocking and then take 5. He is holding Golden Demise. If you block, you enable Divine Verdicts, you enable combat tricks. I don't think that's what you want to be doing.
And Manfield with 4 mana up, not only, but Sajgalik here is asking for trouble, and he's going to get it as well with this Divine Verdict. Chances are if he'd taken the 5 there, Manfield would have been able to commit further to the board with that 5 mana.
Maybe not. We don't know. Maybe Seth would have realized that something is up, but I would have played this a bit greedier. I would have just said, oh, I'm scared of a combat trick, let me take the damage. I wouldn't have literally said that, but I would have pretended that was the reasoning.
I think saying that actually out loud probably would have undone the effectiveness of the bluff.
It also depends on the level of player you're facing.
That's true. Also their facility with various languages as well. Maybe they just don't understand you. Legion Conquistador number 3 coming down now.
And Eduardo does get some nice value here.
Yeah, so this is straight up 4 for 1. Well, not quite really because of the role of Legion Conquistador. An X for 1. An X for 1, you can say. 6 mana. Queen's Agent, nice way to recover after. That
nice way to recover.
Ding, got it.
That was sweet. That's a nightmare for Eduardo. He just handled the whole board, and then not only is there a Queen's Agent, but Seth already demonstrated how he's going to get it back.
Yeah. So once he's dealt with the first 4/4 lifelinker, Manfield's going to be able to do it again. So, Ravenous Chupacabra is such a great answer to it, but now Manfield has a way to return this 6-drop to his hand if he so chooses. Other options aren't looking too tasty. But no, facing off against Ravi Chups, you're wanting something very resilient, and you're wanting something like a Queen's Agent which can hold down the fort, gain some life.
I think that's what Seth is going for.
Yeah.
If I saw that correctly, Eduardo was also holding Ixalan's Binding, but decided to play out the Chupacabra first to get something on the board. Maybe even baiting Seth into returning a 6-drop so that he can exile it afterwards.
Manfield now with that classic 30-degree tilt on his lands. I don't know why he always sits at an angle to the table. Seems to just be the way he goes here.
You know, some people play by the rules and others don't.
Yeah, that's very true. Legion's Lieutenant is going to be boosted itself by this Sanguine Glorifier, which comes down as a 4/4. That's a tidy turn for Manfield. He's just added a lot of power and toughness to the board.
3/3 and 4/4, at least as long as both of these creatures stay alive, which is not guaranteed, of course.
I don't know why that horse has a muzzle. This bitey horse, and it's got a muzzle, and then it's got spikes on its head.
And the muzzle looks kind of dangerous as well.
That's what I'm saying. It's very dangerous. I mean, I'd rather have the horse bite me than have it impale me with the two little spikerinos there. And this Fathom Fleet boarder just has no respect for safety. That is the last place to pop a sword, mate. Put it in your belt. Now, what's going on there? So get a haircut. Dreadlocks, my goodness. Kids these days, Simon. Dreadlocks, Snapchat. What's going on here? 4 mana for Seth Manfield. Hasn't redeployed the Queen's Agent just yet, but here it is. And it's a pious interdiction off the top. The hits don't stop for Manfield here. But an Ixalan's binding.
That was Eduardo's plan all along. He just didn't want Seth to deploy that many powerful other cards in the meantime.
Yeah. So delay with the Chupacabra and then clean things up with the binding. But in the meantime, yeah, Manfield has reloaded and redeployed very, very convincingly. And all of a sudden, this ridiculous little cucumber is not looking as impactful as it could have been. We've seen Sajgalik lose a game after having deployed Ravenous Chupacabra.
Well, it's not a card that you just play and you win the game. It's a card that gives you...
Well, depending on who you believe, Simon, and that is exactly what it is.
No, that's just not true. A 2/2 is not that impactful in this format. It does punish both late game strategies and aggressive strategies very well, which is why it's such a great card.
Well, this particular dog didn't have too much homework to eat. After having dispatched the Queen's Agent, it sat there and not done a whole lot more in the face of the big beaters on the side of Manfield. And he's now got an evasive threat in the form of Vampire Revenant.
And Eduardo is only on 8, so that's a 2-turn clock if you factor in the Lieutenant.
Yes, the Vampire Revenant all the more impactful when its power and toughness boosted by the Legion Lieutenant. I mean, it is something of a glass cannon, a 3/1. It's you know, susceptible to any number of ping effects, although there aren't too many of them. But, you know, things like Raging Sword 2, things like Tilinali's Crown, these are all very efficient answers to it.
I like Dual Shot more and more.
Yeah. We don't see too many of it, given it's only an Ixalan, but the card's pretty good. Well, in comes the Chupacabra here. Chupacabra.
That's a pretty easy way to deal 2 damage. I mean, Seth knows the whole deck list from Eduardo, but he can figure out that Eduardo probably wants that Chupacabra to die.
Chupacabra? Chupacabra. The card's ridiculous. The name is even more ridiculous.
The name is a nightmare.
Could have called it Kill Dog. Dogblade?
Necrotal.
Necraddle. Necrotal 2.0.
Slightly different spelling.
Yeah.
Okay. Bit of lifelink, maybe?
All right. Bishop Soldier going up to a 3/3. Dogratal.
Yeah, that's it.
We'll leave it there. Manfield now. Built out quite the board for himself here. Sajgalik looking to poke through some damage, but I think Manfield's got this one on lock so far.
I'm afraid that Eduardo will have to attack next turn just to gain the life to stay alive here. Wow.
Yeah, another way to shore up those defenses as well with a 2/5. And Sajgalik is edging ever closer here.
But Sajgalik's hand is actually amazing.
Is
this
it really?
game is a lot closer than it looked like. Reaver Ambush and Baffling End.
So Baffling End on the left hand, it's a great start here. It's a great start. It's one of those occasions where even if the Baffling End leaves the battlefield, which it probably won't, the 3/3 that it leaves behind is so much worse than the Legion's Lieutenant. I don't think the end was particularly baffling, by the way. I know exactly what happened here. What else is in Sajgalik's hand that pushes him so much further ahead?
Reaver Ambush. So he has another solution to most likely a flyer, unless he figures out that getting rid of the 3/3 ground creature allows him to attack for more damage and gain more life in the process. So this is actually quite a tricky turn. He's looking at 3 points of life to be gained off his Bishop Soldier. If he kills the ground creature, all of his creatures can attack. He's willing to lose the Chupacabra in exchange for 9 points of damage and him gaining 3. And then suddenly Seth Manfield has trouble to raise that from his perspective. But that's only one of the possible lines. I think all 3 creatures on Seth's side are valid targets for a Reaver Ambush. The problem that I have is if Bishop Soldier trades with the ground creature, then how are you winning the long-term race against the flyer?
Well, the Reaver Ambush is deployed against the Sun-crested Pterodon there. And now we're going to see all of these 3/3s rock and roll. Manfield with the option to trade off, and that Bishop Soldier is the one that you've marked here? Yeah,
but in this particular case, I would definitely attack with the Chupacabra as well, because Manfield knows he has to stop the lifelinker.
So just free 2 points.
I think it's free. And if it's not free, you're gaining 3 more life, which probably means you're surviving that much longer.
Well, the Chupacabra is going to stay back here. Sajgalik taking a slightly different angle. But I mean, Manfield almost priced into blocking here, and that's going to buff us Sajgalik's life total quite nicely. Manfield still considering his options here. And I have to say now, with the conclusion of this game, we will actually have found our final semi-finalist, Simon, on the back tables. A result from the Brad Nelson-Alexander Kreutz match. It is the winner. Alexander Kreutz gets up and about against Brad Nelson, so the dream run of the American superstar comes to an end, unfortunately for him, in the quarters, but well done indeed to Alexander Kreutz, coming all the way over here from Germany to get it done in London, and he's found himself a berth in the semi-finals. And we'll find out shortly who he could be facing off against, Seth Manfield or Eduardo Sajgalik. Manfield deploys Dusk Legion Zealot. And is there a follow-up here for the world number 1?
The world number 1 also just put himself down to 6, so suddenly 2 hits by 3/3s is lethal. Okay, going back up to 8.
And now, it's back to Sajgalik. A fair bit closer, as you mentioned, Simon, than we initially thought. Pious Interdiction, one of the premium removal spells available in this colour pair. So much excellent removal in black-white. Sajgalik rips I think it was a Blankski there. It was just a plains off the top.
Yep. He's holding lands.
Holding lands. Okay. Greedy Viscount.
So this is actually a spot where I think, well, it's tough. But if you attack with both, does your opponent block? Because if they don't, you lose the game immediately.
Fathom Fleet Border in for 3. Manfield down to 5.
But if you don't attack with both, how are you going to win?
Sajgalik on 4. Is there a way for Manfield to push through another point of damage here? We know that Manfield is very, very close to it, given the fact that Sajgalik is holding a single land. He's got nothing. What's this?
Eduardo has to sacrifice...
Oh, it's Vona's Hunger.
With the City's Blessing.
With the City's Blessing, so he has to sacrifice half of his creatures rounded up. Vona's a hungry lady, and she's going to have her due.
And the key here is that Eduardo has to keep the blocker around, because otherwise he would be dead to the 1 damage of the Zealot.
So a very tidy play there for Manfield, cleaning up the board nice and neatly here on the back of that Vona's Hunger. And now a forced block with the Ravenous Chupacabra. Another play here for Manfield off the side of I think it was Pride of Conquerors, and that is enough to propel Seth Manfield, the world number 1 player, into the semi-finals, alongside the likes of Steve Rubin, Alexander Kreutz, and Marcelino Freeman. A masterclass here from Manfield. This mirror match deftly maneuvered by Seth Manfield, and I tell you what, he's impressed me very much indeed. But Eduardo Sajgalik, full credit to him after a very convincing performance, as well as we bring you Back to the booth, ladies and gentlemen. Simon Goertzen to my right. My name's Riley Knight, of course, and we are going to check in with some of the winners down in the feature match here. We've got a little dugout interview getting prepped as we speak. But Simon, one thing I want to talk about here before we check in with Manfield is the fact that these two white-black decks had slightly different angles, but I'm kind of finding it hard to pick apart which one was actually better here.
I think in game 1, Eduardo's deck looked pretty weak, but in games 2 and 3, we saw that he has quite a lot of power available to him. And the Golden Demise dealt with the Legion Conquistador, so it was a very, very even game. I think when Eduardo was holding the 2 removal spells, he was a slight favorite to even win the game at that spot.
Well, ultimately, it was Seth Manfield that got over the line. And we're going to check in with him right now. We got him live in the feature match area. Seth, thanks so much for joining us, and congratulations on the semi-final berth. Just talking about the fact that you're obviously playing in a pseudo-mirror against Sajgalik there. Do you feel like your deck was clearly better than Sajgalik's, or was how close did you feel it was?
I mean, it was pretty close. Neither of our decks were great. I felt like I was slightly favored because of the 4 Legion Conquistadors, because those give you a huge edge just in terms of card advantage. But on the flip side of that, he had Golden Demise, so that's kind of a trump card that I kind of played into a little bit, but most of my creatures are 2 toughness or less. And then he also had Ixalan's Binding, so that was a card I was worried about. If he was to say Ixalan's Binding a Conquistador, and then I would be unable to play the other 3 or whatever.
Yeah, a bit of a blowout.
Yeah, so there was a couple cards that he had that I was worried about, and they were pretty close. Like, I think that game I drew a few more spells than he did. Game 2 it was the reverse of that. So he was attacking me from discard, from the discard angle. So the Conquistadors really helped me fight through that as well, because it just allows me to have more cards in my hand to discard. And yeah, he played well. The pride of he drew Golden Demise all 3 games, which made it a little bit more difficult for me. But Pride of Conquerors, I was trying to set up the City's Blessing, that game 3, and I kept on being 1 short, so I had to make these suboptimal plays. The turn where he kind of cracked, he used 2 removal spells and then cracked in. I didn't feel good about that particular turn, but luckily I was able to regroup after that.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that turn where he played the 2 removal spells. You had 2 flyers and a 3/3 ground creature. Do you know what would have happened if he attacks with the Chupacabra as well? Would you have blocked that, or still gone for the trade? Yeah,
I for sure would have blocked the Chupacabra, because actually, if he has nothing there, if he just has a land, which I guess he probably did, I actually have lethal with Pride of the Conquerors on the next turn, because I can go Pious Interdiction, Pride of the Conquerors. But if I just take it and then he plays a creature or something, then I'm in a really bad spot. So I felt like I was taking the more conservative line to just trade off with the Bishop Soldier there. And his deck didn't have a ton of removal. He cast pretty much all of his removal already, so I was pretty confident that the 3/1 in the air was going to be able to eventually finish things off.
Well, Seth, look, we don't want to keep you too long from your semi-final match, but just very quickly checking in with you about your feelings as you head towards the end of this tournament. I mean, this is a great preparation for your attempt to defend the title, of course, the reigning Pro Tour champion that you are, as we head to Bilbao. How does this feel to be so deep into the tournament? Obviously got to bolster the confidence approaching Bilbao.
Yeah, I mean, we've been here since Tuesday, Team Genesis, and we've been drafting nonstop. These guys love to draft, and they kind of look for me for guidance on that. So I've done a lot of drafts, and I feel really confident already in this format. And yeah, I also really like Black-White Vampires. That's my favorite archetype.
All right. Well, look, we hope to see much more success from you, not only today, but in the coming time heading into Bilbao, mate. Look, very best of luck to you in the semi-finals, and thanks so much for joining us, Seth Manfield.
No problem.
Excellent there. So that is, of course, the world #1, former world champion, and, of course, reigning Pro Tour champion, Seth Manfield. Thanks so much for joining us there, Seth. Right now, however, we're going to go to a break. Simon Goertzen and I are going to step out of the booth, and you're going to be joined by the likes of Tim Willoughby and Matej Zadlkai. You're not going to want to miss it as we head into the semi-finals of GP London, so stick around. We'll be back just after this.